I just want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Mark Matsuda. I'm the president of Hawai'i Craftsmen, and we're the kind of organization that was helping to facilitate bringing Aspen in. And I just wanted to go and talk to you guys and be able to go and put a face to Hawai'i Craftsmen. There's a bunch of events that we go and put on, and at the same time, a lot of people, Hawai'i Craftsmen can look like a large kind of corporate sort of something, but what I really wanted to do is I just want to go and be able to go and help you guys put a face and a personality to it. And Hawai'i Craftsmen, really what we are is we're an organization that is all volunteer sort of based. And even though we put on these kind of larger sort of exhibitions and things, all of it is driven by people like you guys. And when I go and one of I see my job is to go and connect communities. And the more communities I can go and sort of become related, the better the conversation in contemporary craft gets. So before I go, I can go and talk all night long. But before, you guys didn't come to hear me talk. So before I go and start rambling on, I'm going to go and give it over to Jake so that he can go and introduce Aspen to you guys.
Aspen Golann is an artist, I hope so, educator, and a 17th through 19th century furniture maker, blending iconic American furniture forms with a background in social practice, fine art, and textiles. Her artwork is exhibited nationally and is published in Fine Woodworking Magazine, Architectural Digest, Popular Woodworking, Luxe Magazine, Lost Art Press Blog, American Period Furniture, and others. She serves on the board of A Workshop of Our Own and is an ambassador to the board of Fine Woodworking Magazine. She has received support from her work from the Windgate Foundation, Winterthur Museum, Anderson Ranch Art Center, the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship, and is a recipient of the 2020 Mineck Furniture Fellowship from the Society of Arts and Crafts. Aspen is also the founder of the Chairmakers Toolbox, a project designed to increase equity and access in the field of chair making. So without further ado, Aspen Golann.
Oh.
Let me crown the queen of chair making.
Oh, Jacob. Wait. There we go. All right, cool. So this is Liesl, my sheep. So the whole goal about getting to know Liesl and working with her was really, again, trying to understand materials from scratch and understanding that versatility that you get, right? From understanding a material from its very, from knowing what to feed her and how to care for her, how to shear, how to spin and dye and weave. And I planted a whole dye garden like a total psycho and, went absolutely off the deep end on it. This is one of our weavings, one of our early collaborations. So I would do this thing where I would then go to people's properties who had commissioned blankets from me, and I would forage for dye plants on their property. And so then I would make blankets with the dye plants that I found in their space so that the blanket was sort of like a portrait of their land and of their space. And Liesl and I would visit sometimes together, which is cute, right? So this sort of fascination, right, with making things from scratch is definitely carried over into my woodworking practice. It's just now sort of manifests more in furniture. So this is a Windsor settee that I made, and this is made all out of a single log that I felled. So this process is similarly sort of essentialist in that you choose a tree and there's a lot of sort of thought and emotion that goes into choosing the right tree. You fell it, you drag it back to your property, you split it with wedges, and the entire thing is done with hand tools. The legs were turned on a lathe that plugs in, but one could do it with the pedal lathe. It's possible. Yeah. I'm just not that much of a masochist. But I do love the quiet. And even the finish is milk paint, which is a really ancient form of paint that's like a mixture of, I think it's like plaster and lime and pigments, and it's a huge pain in the butt to use, but it's absolutely worth it. And again, it's that quality of understanding something from scratch so that you can manipulate it at every level and feel really intimately connected to it. There's another sort of picture of just that sheen and that depth of color, because you can layer colors with the milk paint and then buff through them, and you get this like really beautiful richness. This is a extremely different chair. So I went to traditional 17th to 19th century American furniture school. So this is the style of stuff that I was making there. And while I acknowledge that it's like relatively garish in a lot of ways, it was still incredible just to learn how to build this kind of thing from scratch. And so from here, I was working with kiln-dried wood that you would buy in a lumber yard, but I did all the upholstery myself. Every single one of those tacks is like hand tacked. And I really think that, I went into that program hoping not to fall in love with period furniture, but to learn from period furniture how to then make anything I wanted with that skill set, right? But I did kind of like drink the Kool-Aid. And I ended up realizing that this kind of furniture, that if you zoom out enough, if you don't get lost in those details, if you zoom out a bit, then you start to see there are these like really elegant sort of essential shapes, right, in this old furniture. And at least for people who are sort of brought up in like a really sort of traditional American household, like these are sort of haunting forms. Like we are familiar with them. We've seen them. We've seen weird versions of them in thrift stores and museums and our grandparents' houses. And these styles inform the furniture that we live with today. This is some more deets, because I can't not carve any. Like if there's wood, I'm gonna carve it. This is another piece. It's like a demi-lune table with rosewood and mahogany, just all the woods you're not supposed to use and I do not use anymore. Monkeys should have them, not me. But yeah, it's an incredible process to go through sort of like this incredibly ornate thing that from a distance has this sort of elegance to it. But as you get closer, you start to see these like, highly detailed elements. And so I kind of love that about period furniture, that it's got a presence from a distance, but it also, there's a beauty to like extended study with it. You can just get closer and closer and closer. And every element, because it's made by hand, has that kind of, no matter how informed and intelligent the hand is, there's asymmetry, which I find really beautiful. Like each of these leaves is hand carved, so each one has got its own vibe. They're its little toes. I love its like elephant's toes moment. Okay, this is the moment when I realized I'd really fallen off the like period furniture deep end, because I never would have built something that looked like this. This is like 1600s, like pilgrim stuff. Just imagine it in a dark house that's lit only by candlelight, right? Because they didn't have electric lighting back then. So you have to imagine like this garishness is all turned down quite a bit, right? Because you barely see anything. So inlays don't work. You need like relief like this in order to be able to see. But this was also sort of a moment where I feel like furniture started to break me a little bit. There are furniture makers here. It's a really time-intensive, sort of punishing practice at times, and I just needed to have some fun. And I feel like the universe heard me, and I found an airbrush on the side of the road, walking home from the studio, and so I started making these giant, this is like a huge wall-sized drawing, with airbrush that I started mixing together like human bodies and furniture, because as one of the only women in the space that I was in, and as one of the only female woodworkers I had any contact with at that point, I started really feeling my gender in a way that I'd never felt it before, because I'd just never been in like a totally male-dominated space where it mattered that I was a woman, that anyone cared that I was a woman. And so I started noticing this weird thing about furniture, that furniture like is named after parts of the body. Like chairs have backs and legs and carcasses and faces, like clocks have clock faces, right? And also that furniture, it like plays female domestic roles, right? It like hosts, and it bears weight, and it's seen and not heard. It decorates houses, right? It's in the domestic sphere. And so I started being like, I felt this weird kinship with furniture, and so I started doing these weird, loose, blended drawings. And then I started taking that sort of shading quality to marquetry and wood and just being playful and an idiot and making pancake, anything I could, right? And the goal was to be playful, because I find that when I'm playful, sometimes it's hard to invest in playfulness, but when I am playful, I usually have a big breakthrough in my work, like right after that. And so that's what happened. So then I started incorporating that airbrush quality into marquetry, which you saw in those marquetry pancakes. And then this is marquetry of a face. So this is in a really traditional Sheraton chair back that I designed and built with mahogany, and those fans are a really traditional, like 19th century American thing. But the face is just holly that's been sand shaded, so it's burnt in a basically a cast iron filled with really fine hot sand, and you dip the pieces in and it burns an edge, which gives it that shading. But I wouldn't have had that idea to make these more complex forms if I hadn't been playing with that airbrush. So just sort of thinking and talking about how that play, you know, which at a time sort of felt like a failure, like I can't swing it in furniture all the time, I have to let loose, ended up sort of coming back and like cycling around. And this started playing with that idea too of building human bodies into furniture. So now we have like a face placed in a chair back, which starts to like read the chair back as a human back, and yeah, just starting to sort of build off of that. There's the piece as a whole. This is an enameled glass panel that I put into a clock that I built, and so this is again sort of even more just playing off of that thread and just sort of showing how it developed. So then using the airbrush not on paper but on glass, and spraying glass enamels, and then you fire the piece of glass in a kiln and everything vitrifies, like turns into jelly at the same time, and then you cool it and it all is a single sheet of glass. So like you can't scratch this stuff off, it's made of glass. But the idea is sort of using the positioning of these hands to start saying something about this clock generally, and about the clock as a body form. This is just showing the sort of transparency of the panel because it's using those spray enamels. So there's the piece overall, and you can see sort of the way that like this formally dressed woman in this really, you know, traditional portraiture stance, which is typical portraiture of the era that this clock would have been built in as well, starts to play with this idea as the clock face replaces her face, and she's sort of simultaneously like a portrait and also a little bit like a captive of this tiny clock, especially with that little lock in place. So just playing with that idea, I'm like, am I, you know, memorializing this woman? Am I like talking about this sort of like captive experience? There it is. Yeah, there's the whole thing together. Tiny castle, tiny cage, hard to say. So here's another piece that uses that same system of airbrushed enamels. And so with this one, I'm really trying to talk again sort of about that carcass of the, like, it's called a carcass for a case piece, that internal space. And so the idea is that by decorating it with these pieces, then we start to like talk about almost like a disrobing. When you open and use this piece exactly as intended, you're like almost like violating the internal space of the cabinet just by using it in the way you're supposed to use it. And I was also playing off of, this is an old Samuel McIntyre carving, like super famous traditional American carver. And he did a lot of these catenary curves in his carvings, which is like if you hang a piece of chain, for example, the natural curve it creates is called a catenary curve. And so I was playing with that when I was riffing off of just these like layers of American symbolism. And the idea is again to just talk about like female objectification and the relationship between furniture and the body, and females and domestic space and domestic labor. This is another super trippy old school piece that I went nuts on. This is a Windsor chair, like the first green one that I showed you guys. It's a very different style. It's from 1700-ish. It's like a, it's called an arrowback settee because of the little spindles have that arrow shape. And they were traditionally used in a, like a foyer. And so the goal was really like, the goal of them was to sort of welcome people to the home while also showing off how ostentatiously rich you happen to be. So it's like, come, you're welcome, but also like, we're definitely better than you. So it's like this weird dynamic, right, of these pieces and like what they were used for. And so I don't know if anyone can sort of recognize on some subconscious level this style of painting, this like gold on black, like it was really, I'm sure if we go to a thrift store, we'll find something, right, that has this like airbrushed gold on black. So what I was doing was sort of playing with some of the traditional motifs that you'd see, like there's a lot of fruit, there's a lot of garden stuff, but I started incorporating hands and imagery in this way that sort of messed with that idea of hospitality, that sort of displayed like hospitality, but also like a lack of hospitality and a withholding, both through the hands, and there's like a lot of cutting and pruning and working in the garden as well as like offering of fruit. So this is just me going deep into all of these traditional sort of old school methods of image making and display, while also sort of talking about my own experience and trying to give period furniture like some sort of relevance in contemporary making. When COVID started, I kind of went off the deep end in a whole different direction, which was using these like traditional furniture making skills that I had learned, but to just be extremely playful and small scale. And part of that was not having access to my big studio anymore, so I had to work small. Part of it was the fact that working at all is a hugely soothing experience for me, and so I had to keep working. Part of it is also that while brushes are not furniture, they still have that relationship to function that furniture does, where it's like you have a ton of design freedom, but there's still this like tiny node that you get to sort of circle around. Like a chair it can look like anything, but you have to be able to sit on it. And a brush can look like anything, but you have to be able to technically brush with it. Not that maybe the owners of these brushes do a lot of like cleaning with them, but they theoretically could, right? And so it became this incredibly fun way for me to, like those airbrush drawings, just try stuff. And I think that for a really long time, I had been doing this subconscious thing where I was really valuing big, complicated work over small, playful work. And I really enjoyed sort of freeing myself of that dynamic, of that belief that small is somehow not as good as big, or that playful isn't as valuable as functional, or, you know, sculptural doesn't have the same oomph as, you know, furniture, right? And so finding a way out of that was incredibly valuable for me just on a conceptual and personal level. But I also have found that being able to make these trippy little things has allowed me to try out some technical stuff that I probably wouldn't have risked on a larger piece, because, you know, a piece of furniture can take an entire month to make. And I'm not going to do something weird last minute and then find out that it doesn't work, right? So if I can try one of these, I can't tell you how many of these I burned during COVID. It was so awesome to just be able to throw away anything that didn't work. But every once in a while, you're like, oh, I can do this really weird system of laminations that works only because of like an ebonizing technique that will affect only certain woods and not other, you know, just being able to try. And I think anyone in this room, we're all artists, you understand the value of being able to like iterate. Right? And if it's easy and quick to iterate, then you make cooler work because you can get deeper faster. So I really enjoy that. These are drafting brushes. Those are erasers on them. Those a little ode to my like perfectionist self. Yeah. I don't know that they've been used for erasing, but they would work. There's a little squad of all of them together. Okay, so I also have a really active teaching practice. I teach a ton. And I think one of the reasons is that I love it. Another one is that I very intimately remember the process of learning. Didn't happen that long ago for me. I started woodworking when I was a couple months before my 30th birthday, and I'm 35 now. So I remember very clearly what it felt like to not know, and then how it felt to learn, and now how it feels to have these skills and be able to play with them and flex them however I want, and just like go about in the world as a person who can mess with wood. It's great. And so I want to share that. I also believe that after 300 years of exclusion, without the participation of like historically excluded makers, woodworking is not, hand tool woodworking is not going to survive. So it's time to make space in a really active way. So in 2020, I started this project called the Chairmakers Toolbox. And I started it with the support of the Society of Arts and Crafts. They gave me a huge grant. And basically the goal is to increase equity and access to chair making specifically. And the reason for that, look at these cute people. Okay, I went too quickly though. I don't want to jump into that yet. The reason for that, and I think I actually have a slide that has a video of it at some point. But basically Windsor chair making specifically, it's like one of the most theoretically accessible forms of furniture making. You don't need a shop. You don't need electricity. You could do it in your kitchen. You could do it in your backyard. For about, $300, you could get all of the hand tools you need for the rest of your life for making these chairs. But because it's this like weird old school thing, and because woodworking has a long history of being male dominated and white dominated, it's been consigned to this small group of like period enthusiasts who just want to keep remaking the same beautiful Windsor chair over and over and over again. And that's great, that's cute, that's fine. It's not what I'm going for. So I'm really excited about this form of woodworking as a way to open up the field. So it's a 3-part project, the Chairmakers Toolbox. The first one is education. So I travel and I teach these free and sliding scale classes to anyone who identifies as an underrepresented woodworker or an outsider in the field. And I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's been like one of the most cherished experiences of the last, of my entire life. Getting to spend time with people, getting to hand them these tools, getting to create a space in which they feel safe and they feel empowered. And with the grant money, I've been able to do it for free. So this is a little chair that I designed. So you saw a big complicated Windsor when I first started this talk. So this is a super simple one that I designed just for these classes. So the goal is to make the simplest possible chair. Oh my God, the sunset. I know you see it a lot. It's probably not even a good one for you. Okay. So this is a super simple Windsor chair. The goal of it is to use every single one of the tools to give students a chance to explore all of these complicated ways of sort of drilling at angles, building all of these different things, doing steam bending, carving out seats, all of this stuff without wasting a bunch of time on frills. Because the idea, hopefully, oh, this is the video. Pause, don't play yet. The idea, hopefully, is that students will then be able to take that information and basically treat that chair like a paper doll and dress it up with whatever they want, right? That's the goal, is not to just say, here's the chair, please build it, okay, goodbye, enjoy your life. It's to say, here's a system of processes, here's an object that represents those processes that you can take home, but please ignore it, please forget about it, please make your own thing. So here's a little, do you guys want to see, it's 1 minute. It's just edited together, but you can kind of see. That's a fro. It's me. It's embarrassing to watch. And this is how loud the entire process is. It's the loudest part. That's it. And then there's a chair. Woo! There's the chair in white. Okay. I think I included this slide because I just want to talk for just a hot sec about simplicity and the value of it when it comes to doing equity work in furniture making. It's like, everybody knows how hard it is to afford a class, right? But then there's also the amount of time you spend away from your own shop, there's travel, there's just the amount of investment required for people to come and learn, and they lose sight when they're making a complicated thing of these like essential skills, which is really what it's all about. So just stripping it all down has been super valuable. I also, I take teaching really seriously, probably too seriously. I made a 60-page zine on how to build the chair. And so anyone who takes the class gets the zine, and it has, details of each and every piece of the object and how it develops, and then all of the different, design principles and why it's like this, because go ahead, change it, it's up to you. And then lists of all the tools and all of that jazz. And all of that's going to be free for download on the Chairmakers Toolbox and on my website. But we are also starting a zine distribution venue. We just got funding for it, so this is the first time I'm telling anybody about that. But yeah, we're starting a zine distro, so we're going to be collecting information and publications from a lot of different people and getting that information out there, which will be awesome. Here's a picture from the very first class, it was the sample class that we ran. And I know it's a little bit dark to talk about, but I just want to admit, I think that as a woman in woodworking, And as a white cis woman in woodworking, I still experienced like this feeling of just deep isolation when it came to being in that studio space. And then that sort of became intertwined with like anytime I wanted to woodwork, I also had to go and be in this space where I like was not very welcome and I didn't feel at home and I didn't feel comfortable. And so I really I tried to use that somewhat traumatic experience to guide this project, right? And try to create those safe spaces. And so this is this little dingus teaching how to split the wood at a woodworking space for women and non-binary people. So while I'm 100% an imperfect person who will always be on the journey of trying to make more equitable, more safe and inclusive spaces for people, I will say it's just been like an utter pleasure so far. So anyway, that's part one. Part two is the actual toolbox. So it's called the Chairmakers Toolbox. And so the goal of the toolbox is we use all these old weird tools. You saw me use a few of them. However bizarre they are and seemingly random, they're actually very hard to find these days. Like this is a Pro, it's been sold out for months, maybe even a year at this point. And I found that, I don't want to sneak ahead of myself. I found that like, basically the people who are making these tools currently, they're hard to find in antique stores. So, some of them are easy to find, some of them are hard to find. Good ones are very hard to find. The people who are making them, contemporarily are overloaded with business. They have 3-year wait lists, a lot of them. A lot of them are like, they're pretty much all very demographically homogenous. And I'm like, you know what, there's space in this market. And I have money now from this grant to buy the tools I need to go teach these classes. So I designed this thing called the Toolbox, where these are some of the tools that we commissioned for the project. So what I did was I reached out to friends of mine who were already tool makers or who were jewelers, people who worked with metal, and showed them all these Windsor Chair tools. And it was like, which of these appeal to you? Once they chose a tool that appealed to them, then I hooked them up with a master chair maker. This is Caleb James and that's Peter Galbert. And these are Zooms that they had with some of our tool makers to talk about their tool, and so they spent basically an entire year prototyping these tools, sending them back and forth to their tool mentor, working them up, getting them to the point where they were like beautiful and market ready. And now here they are. So we have a draw knife by Megan Martin and Andrew Mears. We have a tenon cutter, which is what creates that beautiful 6-degree taper by Kelly Harris. These are just some of my, I love these people so much now too. This is a bronze infill mallet, by Eleanor Rose. This is a fro and mallet set. It's like, just the geometry of this is just like chef's kiss. I know it looks simple, but it is like, it's the best fro that's ever froed. Made by Rachel Kettinger and Mary Ellen Hitt. And then we have the carving axe by Julia Kaltoff. And the Travisher, chair carving Travisher by Claire Minahan. And the spoke shave by David Clemens. I love you guys. So yeah, sorry, I'm skipping ahead again. It's been the most incredible experience to connect these people with the mentors that I've known in my field, to give people who have way too much information and not enough time all of this opportunity to connect with people who are interested in making tools. So many of these makers now have the money that they need to support their businesses. Like, their tool is now the thing that's paying their rent. So now they are free makers as well. And instead of waiting around for institutions to grant scholarships, we have people paying outsiders to make tools and then buying them from them. So people are getting paid to participate in this field rather than occasionally welcomed in through some institutionally organized scholarship, which is like, woo! Anyway, yay! Thank you for scholarships too. Love a scholarship. But you know what I mean. It feels amazing to feel desired and respected and included on that deeper level. Plus, it's nice to have enough money to pay rent. Okay, this is the last part. It's called the Living Tools Project. And this is kind of an embarrassing picture. This is a candid photo of me. My mentor in Windsor chair making His name is Peter Galbert, and I was in his studio one day when he got a call from one of his students who was in his mid-90s, and he had just realized he was not going to be making chairs anymore, and he wanted his tools to go to someone who would use them. And at that point, I had a 6-year plan for how I was going to buy all of these tools, and Pete just yelled over to me. I was turning something on the lathe, and he was like, "Do you want these tools?" And I was like, "Yes." And 3 days later, this box arrived with every tool I needed to be a Windsor chair maker. And I have never, I get a little, usually cry when I talk about this, but I've never felt that kind of support and that kind of connection. And then after, I then reached out to Peter Nissen, the man who donated the tools, and connected with him just about what it meant for him to know that somebody was going to be using these for the rest of their career. You know, I mean, I'll be using these for the next 50 years, I hope. And I immediately in that moment made a promise to him that I would never sell them and that I would give them away when it was time for me to give them. And that's what started the Living Tools Project. So we collect tools from retiring makers and then redistribute them to people who are outsiders in the field. This is, again, me sort of like posing with my sick collection of Windsor chair tools that I got from Peter Nissen. And yeah, we recently did a collection at a man's house who'd been a luthier for 40 years and collected all of his violin tools and just like lovingly photographed and documented and cared for each of them. And the amount of time I just spent with his family, and it was so much more beautiful than a estate sale, right? Where people come and they pick off things one at a time and everything disappears. Like Wade Lowe's, he's the luthier. His entire collection is going to pass into the hands of somebody else who's going to use it, and it's going to pass into the hands of somebody else who's going to use it, and that's going to go on and on and on. So all 3 parts of that project are live now. This is the, landing page of our website. But if any of you are interested in like connecting or just talking about this kind of work, or if maybe there's a part of you that's now itchy to make a chair, or talk about chairs, they're really addictive, so I feel guilty welcoming you to it, but also come with me. Really fun. Anyway, it's been an incredible journey so far, and it's only just started. I hope, fingers crossed, 501c3 status by the end of the year. So we'll see. Woo. Anyway, that's me after turning badly. Supposedly if you turn well, you don't get chips all over you, but I don't know how to do that, so I just zip my hoodie all the way up. Anyway, so please keep in touch. There's my Instagram and my website and the Chairmakers Toolbox website, but anyway, just thanks for spending time here. Thank you for coming.
As an aside, Aspen is going to be teaching a workshop on her brush making. So if you guys have been taking a look at her work and actually want to go and experience it, we're going to be teaching a workshop Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Yeah. And you guys can go and register at hawaiicraftsmen.org for it. If you are at all inspired by the work that Hawai'i Craftsmen does to go and bring in artists, the best way that you guys can go and support Hawai'i Craftsmen is becoming a member. We are an all-volunteer organization, and we depend on membership as our principal way of making sure that we can keep the doors open at Hawai'i Craftsmen. Even if you are not thinking that you are a craftsman, even if you are an appreciator, or even if you are inspired by all of this, if you can go and become a member, that helps to go and support and helps to go and bring artists like Aspen to Hawaii.
For what it's worth, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. And I get to be here on this beautiful island with you guys. What is life? It's such a dream. Anyway, sort of wishing this wasn't the last slide. Do you guys have any questions? Or I mean, is it late? Did I run?
No, you're good.
There's usually a little timer that tells me how.
Yeah. Any questions, anybody? Please.
I want to make chair.
Yeah, you do.
Maybe we'll bring you back for a chair workshop.
Yes, please. Sign me up.
When you were making your tools this weekend, are you going to use any local woods or what are you using?
We talked about it. We're gonna visit Ty's shop. We're gonna see what we can pull out of there.
Nice.
So it could be anything. We're also gonna like collect material because basically anything that you can, we'll talk about it, but there's some requirements. But if you can drill a hole in it, then it can become a brush. I also brought broom corn that was grown in Southern California, and so we can make actual hand brooms with that as well. So there's lots of, we're mostly using Tampico fiber, but I do have some horsehair just so you can touch it and play with it. And yeah, actually my favorite paintbrush is made with like my own mane, which is maybe it's gross, but it works really well. And I see you all have, yeah, so we're gonna be playing with a lot of those things. We're also gonna be thinking about brushes, again, like not just as a function, we're gonna totally do functional brushes, but we're also gonna cover sort of thinking about sculpture when it's tied just a little bit to function. In my mind, it actually is so much more freeing to have technically a use. It's almost like a blank page is kind of terrifying, but having an assignment makes it somehow easier to be like playful and loose and fun, and at least for me, that's how my weird brain works. I need like a little bit of a something where I just go blank. Yeah. I hope so.
I have a silly question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite type of wood?
Woodworkers all talk about it, we don't know how to answer that question because it's like immediately gets into like ultra nerd territory. I'm like, for what purpose? Like, for a chair leg or for like, I really like to work with walnut. It's beautiful. It's like incredibly forgiving. It's so fun because I love carving. It carves gorgeously. Like right off the knife gives an incredible finish. That being said, it is just kind of like a brown wood. So I've started really enjoying working with red oak, which I don't know if you remember, I showed a brush that had little black lines going through it. So like with that, that's actually a very thin piece of red oak, and red oak is filled with tannins, like natural tannins. And so you can make this mixture of vinegar and steel wool. And essentially what happens is then like that steel wool dissolves in the vinegar, and then you can like brush it on top of any wood that has natural tannins, and it goes black and it ebonizes. So I like glue it up with this red stripe through it. I mean, it's a wood red, so it's like brown red, but then you paint it with tannins and it goes black. It's really cool. So I really have been enjoying playing with woods that have those kind of natural properties. But if I'm making a chair, it's oak all the way. Until I come to Hawaii and learn about your woods.
Oh yeah.
Because people make chairs here too. So
It's a whole new palette of woods.
I am so overwhelmed. Yeah.
I have another question. So, two-part. Where do you live currently? I probably missed it. And when you were growing your natural dyes, where were you growing them and what were they?
Oh yeah. Okay, so where I live currently, I kind of skipped over it because I'm just very much in transition. So right now I'm doing a residency that's 4 months long at San Diego State University. And then their furniture and woodworking program. It's like technically a professorship, but I'm not teaching. I'm just making work. Teaching one chair class, but in one semester, that's chill. So yeah, I'm exploring my own practice. I'm actually doing a lot of work with glass during that time. Not a lot of work with wood. I was living in North Carolina, and I'm moving to Maine in July. Yeah, so I'm actually moving into that shop that you saw a photo of me like crying in. And so I'm gonna develop, my friend Pete, he's put aside a year and I've put aside a year, and we're both gonna just work together and see what happens.
And then where did you, what kind of plans were you running for that?
Oh yeah. Let's see. So I was at a boarding school, so I also used a lot of kitchen scraps. So like red onion skins make a very beautiful, like I'm sure you know, make this really beautiful green that was in that blanket. As long as it's on top of gray, right? So it depends on the substrate. But I did a lot of marigold, indigo, cochineal. I also tried a lot of things like black walnut, obviously, a lot of black walnut in the Northeast. I was in Vermont. I answered all of your questions in reverse order. that was also quite a while ago at this point. I was a high school teacher for 6 years before I became a woodworker, and before I was that, I was a child. So, yeah. But yeah, I loved being a high school teacher, and that's where I learned. That's where I met Liesel, my sheep, and that's where I taught fibers and lit. My degree is in Russian lit. Because, you know, phases of life, man. Yeah, I thought I wanted to be a translator.
That's quite a jump.
It was a slow dissolution. I'm still into it. I love the idea of translating. I'll sit with books and translate at times to like relax, but yeah, it's definitely not. I'm too handsy, I think, for that life. I also think that like a lot of people, I didn't really believe. I know some people do craft for a living and some people are artists, but like I didn't think I could be one of them. I didn't think that was a path that was open to me. So it took me a long time to find it and even longer to believe in it, and there's still some days where I don't. So it's, you know, it's a whole thing. I just wrote a thing recently actually about feeling that strange feeling where you take like basically like all of your curiosity and your weirdness and your passion and all these delicate qualities, right? And then you put them at the center of what creates fiscal stability in your life. And all of a sudden, like, that's a lot of pressure to put on qualities that do not thrive under pressure, right? Like, it's hard to feel curious and playful when you're, like, trying to pay bills. So it's like this weird balance, and so trying to create space for that has been, it's such a trip. It's such a trip, and so just learning how to make space, how to, like, function inside this system that wants me to be, like, IKEA, and I'm not, and I don't want to be, you know, it's difficult. I mean, it's beautiful. I believe that the resolution of these questions is going to be the life I want. It's just a question of like breathing through it sometimes. Sometimes it's the easiest thing in the world, and other times I'm like, what am I doing?
Maybe it's more of a comment than a question.
Yeah.
So, I know you mentioned you're an educator. Miho and I, because of the pandemic, really questioned how education, how is it working, how is it not working? All of these questions become part of our reflection in what we do as teaching artists. And I find hope when I talk to people who are, well, younger than me, I'm in my 50s, that I find this group of like 30, I don't know, there's something about this quality of, like you just mentioned, like what you went to school for is not necessarily what came out of what you're doing now. Yeah. But that openness of not being able to like pinpoint that I'm going to be a chemist or this or that. Yeah. But I don't know, I'm just really looking at that system of education and how we have to allow for that play and allow for that. I don't know. I mourn that it didn't happen earlier. Well, like I mourn, I think I love that I got there at 29. It could have been later. Could have been a lot earlier. Like I had all the information I needed to be the person that I am right now when I was 7, right? Yeah. But I was guided away from it in a very active way that was, done by people who loved me, who wanted me to thrive in the world, right? But they didn't know about this world. This is a world too, and it's great, and it's working. So, just trying to find and believe in that. I mean, it's why I wanted to teach. And I do love teaching. And I went to furniture school, I went there with the intention of returning to teaching full time. And then I didn't expect to be good at it. I didn't expect to love it this much. And I didn't expect the world to embrace me the way that it has. And so I've been sort of riding this other series of potentials and just seeing how it goes. But as you can see, I'm getting sucked hard back into teaching. I can't stay away from it. Well, I think you've touched upon that idea of having or knowledge being passed down, and how that is a big important part of, I don't know, legacy of how information gets passed down.
Yeah.
And I know some of this working with your hands a lot of times gets tossed aside and technology takes its place in that battle. But I don't know. I talked to Setsuko too from Japan, and all of their traditions sort of get lost in the next generation because they're no longer interested or it's hard.
They just don't know that they're interested. I mean, the other thing is woodworking is so boring, but the thing is, like, you need to be bored sometimes, or at least I do. Like, I couldn't be a painter. I wanted to be a painter. I thought that was my thing.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm not smart enough to be a painter. Painters have to make decisions every half second. Like, I can't keep up with that. With woodworking, maximum I make a decision once every 3 hours. It's like I have an idea, I'm like, ooh, what if that was like slightly different? 3 hours later, it is slightly different, and then I can have another idea. But it's not like I need to have an idea like right now and again and again and again and again. It's like there's this balance between getting to express myself and being an individual who makes weird artistic choices, and then being someone who just like sands and removes wood and like carefully changes the shape of something. And so that fading back and forth from like being a person who's sort of an active artist and being a craftsperson who's more connected to like a silent tradition of makers is like, that balance really just does it for me, Yeah, I think that's why it's craft. I mean, we can justify it in all these different ways, but it just fits me. Yeah. And I'm sure it fits other people too. There's others out there that just don't know, or they do know, but they don't have words for it or a structure in which to believe that it could be value making for them. Yeah. I probably talked too long, I'm sorry.
No, I just got something.
I just really enjoy your presentation and also the furnitures that it's really, I think the what you call the feminist quality, that its sensibility is beyond that I expected. And that's coming, that it's really surprising and excited for me. Yeah.
I'm so glad.
And I'm so glad, and I like to see more women to do that. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
You guys are here.
Really.
It's happening. I know. I'm like,
I wish I get younger so I could do this.
You can do it. Yeah. The secret of that pink chair is that it's upholstered in my skin tones, and the color of the wood is my hair color. So it's like my little portrait chair. It was the last piece I made in school. I was like, this is for me. This is my throne. I did this.
This is Aspen's piece. Or
Yeah.
you can tell
Like theoretically, I could like lounge in it nude and be like, this is mine. I blend. It's just my like weird little secret of that chair. That's not a secret anymore.
Legs and everything is just to have a different quality, that presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I was very happy inspired to see so many women of your toolmakers that you were able to commission or
Just involve. Yeah.
That was beautiful.
I mean, it was just honestly reaching out to people who already had the skill set, but obviously are too cool to know about Windsor chairs. It's like they're like beautiful jewelers and gorgeous metal fabricators. They're like, what's a fro? Like if they don't care. But then trying to explain to them, I'm like, if you make this, I'm confident you'll be able to sell as many as you can produce, and just trying to talk them through that, just as it's a crutch while they are able to develop other things, and like really, like Rachel, the woman who made the beautiful fro, I think she's using that money to save up for her power hammer, so she'll be able to buy her own power hammer, and that's huge. I mean, that's a career changer. Yeah, Eleanor Rose, who made that beautiful infill mallet, has a 3-year wait list now for that thing. And we are already working with our next round of makers. So I just had a Zoom yesterday with one that's almost ready to come out. Yeah.
Congratulations, that is really
I mean, they did it. I just set up Zooms, but yeah.
You facilitated really beautiful.
I think it's one of those things, like I've been reading a lot about equity work over the last 5 years. and how to do it well, and that one of the first, and I learned this as a teacher too, that you can't wield power responsibly until you recognize that you have it. And so looking for these ways that I have power, right? I went to this old school woodworking school. I have the phone numbers of these Windsor Chair masters. You know, I can ask them to have a quick Zoom with someone who has the metalworking skills to make it, but they've never used the tools, so they don't know what it needs to feel like or be like or weigh, you know? And so just honestly, like, it's like 5 Zooms of their time, and now there's the best fro they've ever used on the market.
I bet they're so honored to have been able to maybe pass on that knowledge. Maybe
Yeah, they're into it. Yeah. It's great. And they're like, all the fros are terrible. Make it like this. And Rachel's like, sure, I don't care. I'll make it like that. Like, I have no investment in this, you know, and then she makes it and she, you know, my hope someday, my true dream is to like get all the tool makers together for a class. So they get to use their own tools and like learn how to use them. I just think it would be stupid fun. It's probably not necessary.
No, absolutely necessary.
They get to meet each other. And so yeah, that's sort of acknowledging my own power. You know, it's not comfortable to do, but to just recognize like, you know, I like to see these people as just my friends, but the reality is that they have a lot of clout in the field. They have a lot of information. If they say that's the best fro on the market, people are going to buy that fro, you know? And so just recognizing that I know these people who need a source of income and have incredible skill set, and then I know these other people who are desperate for tools, and I see the market, and I have the potential to connect them, seems like a no-brainer.
That's a great place to end it. Thank you, Aspen.
Thank you guys so much.